everyone, and welcome to The Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Have you ever been lying in the dark, trying to fall asleep, but for some reason you can't stop seeing things? The coat on the door now looks as though someone is standing there. The trees outside, reflecting images of shadow people, the long stretched arms and fingers of something disturbed. You gently close your eyes, reminding yourself that you have an imagination. That's one way it can go anyway. Then there's the other way, the one where you close your eyes and tell yourself the same thing, but the feeling doesn't go away. So you open your eyes. Now, it's frighteningly obvious that what you're seeing is far more real than just your imagination. That is terrifying, isn't it? Well, we've got a few examples to explore tonight. So, let's get started, shall we? I'd like to know your opinion or see if you can help me with this issue. To sum up, since my baby was born 14 months ago, we've been experiencing events in our home that's becoming more and more intense. When my daughter was only a couple of weeks old, my wife, 26, and I, 27, started to see someone walking in our house. This always happened very fast and out of the corner of our eyes, so we didn't give it much thought. We saw a tall, black figure. After this, I began to experience more things because, to let my wife sleep, I would go with my daughter to the living room to take care of her, and so in case of crying, she wouldn't wake up my wife. Several times while I was in the living room, and knowing 100% that my wife was asleep, I heard someone turn on the kitchen light and then turn it off after a while. This could happen maybe 10 times in an hour. I should clarify that the first 2 times I got up to see, but keep in mind that at the moment I had a baby in my arms sleeping, so I didn't want to wake her up either. I never saw anyone in the kitchen turning the light on or off. After this, after a couple of months, the creepy thing happened to us. My daughter began to grow teeth at 6 months, and already at that age, she slept alone and in her own room near ours. As is classic in these cases, due to the pain in her teeth one night, she woke up crying hysterically. And when we both woke up to go to her room, we clearly heard the voice of an elderly, masculine, and serious person laughing in her room while she was crying. Our house is about 50 meters from our neighbors, and we were alone. It was totally scary, and since we didn't feel safe in that house, we decided to move. We've been living in the new house for a couple of months without any problems, until a couple of weeks ago. My daughter, who's now 14 months old and sleeps all night long, began to wake up around 3 or 4 in the middle of the night. Usually, when she wakes up in the morning, she calls us. But when she wakes up at this time, we found that she just starts laughing and talking to someone. She sleeps with the curtains closed and the lights off, just like us. This has been happening a lot, and we always go into the room, but there's no one there, and she goes to sleep again after that. The latter happened today while I was at work. She went to take a nap as usual at noon, and usually sleeps an hour or even an hour and a half. But this time, she woke up at 30 minutes, and again, she started talking and laughing. But the laughs were like the ones that she does when we tickle her. My wife entered the room and found her standing, staring at the sofa in front of her crib. Scared, she took her out of the crib and took her to the living room. But just as they're leaving, my daughter said, Bye, to the sofa. When we change her diaper, we've noticed that she has bruises that she did not have before. She hasn't fallen off of anything recently. Can someone help me with this? I don't want to move again. I just need help. We're scared that something can happen to her. I want to add that there's no person that's died in my wife's family. All of her grandparents are even still alive. In my family, on the other hand, both of my grandparents have died, and my best friend 5 years ago. I don't know if it would be one of them, but I don't think that any family members or my best friend would want to harm my daughter. This sounds crazy, but is 100% true. I used to live in a mobile home trailer park growing up, and there was a hallway that went from one end of the trailer to the other, with the bedrooms coming off of it on the side. My bed was on the wall opposite the hallway, so I could see into the hallway, but not down either side. When I was about maybe 6 or 8 years old, if I stayed awake after my dad went to sleep and stared at the doorway, I would start to be able to make out a hand stretching from beyond the doorway in the hall from the right side to the left side of the door. The longer I looked, the more the hand would appear, until eventually, over the course of a few minutes, I could see a red and white striped shirt or sweater sleeve. If I continued to stare, after a longer period, the body of a boy would appear in the doorway. I specifically remember hiding under the covers most nights when this would happen, mostly at the first sight of him. I was never antagonized further than him slowly moving, facing my bed from the right side of the door to the left. And if I continued to stare, he would eventually disappear beyond the left threshold. We moved out of that trailer into a home when I'd just turned 9. And that was the end of it. I never really thought about it, and I never told my dad or anyone else about it because by the time I'd already chalked it up to just seeing things and had thought it was my imagination. I'm sure it probably was. About 15 to 20 years later, my dad and I were talking about his best friend that had lived next door, but sadly just passed away. We started talking about our trailer and the older lady that moved in after us. My dad said something like, "Funny enough, Dad's friend told me a few years ago that the woman used to see a little boy in a red and white shirt, like a ghost or something." I was obviously taken aback and told him what I had seen almost every night for a few years, and we were both just a bit shocked at what that might mean. Never experienced anything else, but that completely stumps me. Growing up, my family has been subject to the paranormal in many ways: visual, audio, smelling, and touching. My father was a non-believer until the day he died, always made a logical reason for the bump or the bang. Our basement was a nice, cool place to be, essentially in the summer months, as it retained its cooler temperature. For as long as we can remember, a spirit remained down there and was receptive to the company of the living. We used to play Monopoly at the dining room table, and we would hear the squeaky stairs, and then we would go look at the door as the knob jiggled. Sometimes the door opened, and sometimes just the jiggle. As if some days it had the energy, and others not. When my mother would do laundry, she only went to the basement in the company of one of our 2 black Labradors, Duke and or Duchess. She hated going down there because she was the very religious one, and just hated the feeling of someone behind her. I would go down there and sleep often as my dad was too cheap to install an AC unit, and it was much cooler. I never really felt scared, but I did know I was not alone. Often, I would hear the light switch click on and off. I remember my bike was flipped upside down and had the little beads on the spokes that would tinker-tanker as the kid spun a tire slowly. One time, he must have gotten spooked because I got spooked. He spun the tire when I was down there watching TV. I got up and started to leave the basement thinking, not today, not today. And I felt him behind me, as if escorting me out. I started to run and I felt the adrenaline, as if my friend was about to take me in a game of tag. My dad was an electrician and installed the metal switches with the lights, green and red, indicating current or no current flow. The switches controlled everything from each individual light and the TV. Imagine a circuit breaker, and that's how the electricity was controlled. You could hear these metallic clicks from 100 feet away. After we did some digging, we learned through the library that a kid, Stephen, hung himself as a teenager from severe depression. It was not uncommon for patients to be untreated back in the day. It was sometime in 52 or 53 that this happened, if I remember correctly. My hair just stood up as I recall this next bit. In the laundry room, directly behind the washer and dryer, was our furnace. Above and just off to the side remained the pulley that the young man attached to the joist. This is why my mother hated doing laundry. As soon as the dogs acted funny or raised their hair on their backbone, she was out of there like a bat out of hell. The kid never did anything malicious, but he got satisfaction knowing that he got to you. As long as you could close your eyes, let the chills pass through you, as you kind of raise your head and cocked it as if you wanted to say something but were holding it in. It passed, and then you could continue to do what you were doing. I think he liked my mom the most because she never stood her ground, and besides that one time I ran, I usually did. I think what really gets under my skin was the cat that left no footprints in the winter. Well, that's a story for another time. This story takes place when I was in 6th grade. I'm 21 now. I lived with my mom and my brother in a small but pretty house. When you enter the house, you have a small place to leave your shoes, then a big wooden door to slide, and enter the living room. On the left is a hallway. When you enter the hallway, on the right is a kitchen, and on the left, the bathroom. At the end of the hallway, there are 2 bedrooms. My mother's on the right, and mine, which I shared with my brother, also on the right. The living room floor and hallway floor are made from a different material. The living room floor is more squeaky. This is important for the story. It was early in the morning. My mom went to work and she drove my brother to school. I also had school, but mine started like 30 minutes later than my brother. So I stayed home and I watched cartoons. I was laying in bed with my doors open, the doors behind me. As I was watching TV, I heard Mom's bedroom door opening. It was very loud, like someone was in a hurry. then footsteps in the hallway going to the living room. I could hear when footsteps got to the living room since the floor began to squeak. Then the big wooden door sliding. And after that, nothing. Silence. I was terrified, in a fetal position on my bed, looking for my phone in the bed sheets. Once I found it, I text my mom, "Someone is in the house." She responded, "Are you joking?" I said, "No, come home fast, I'm scared." She sent the neighbor to check on me. The main door and the big wooden doors were closed, but my mom's door was wide open. I still don't know what happened. If this was the only occurrence, I wouldn't even care, but something is definitely in that house. I have a few more stories, so if you're interested, I'll share them. Me and some friends were counselors at a music camp in Northern California, and we always stayed in this super old dorm that was a hospital at one point. My friend Nate was into those ghost hunting shows, and we used to do this thing in the dorm late at night called an EVP session. Basically, you do an AMA with spirits and try to get them to answer questions while recording it, hoping you pick up some paranormal audio. We never took it too seriously. It was mostly something we did for fun after a few drinks. Well, one night we start doing the session, and we start hearing some bumps and sounds in relation to the questions we asked. We're still kind of joking around, going, "Yeah, right." But we feel the room getting a little quieter. Then one of us asks, "What is your name?" A few moments go by, and we hear Nate ask, "That was a joke, right?" He had his headphones hooked into his recorder, and we sat watching him, puzzled, because he had this look on his face. He heard something that we didn't. After some discussion, we played back the audio through the speakers on the recorder so everyone could hear. "What is your name?" we hear our friend ask. We hear a whisper, but clear as a bell, something we didn't hear before. "I'm Timothy."
What's your name? What was that?
I'm Timothy.
Okay, that was a joke, right?
No, did you hear that?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
When I was younger, me and my best friend did everything together. He was like a brother to me. We were inseparable. Moving on a few years, we were on the phone to each other one morning before we went to work. We were planning out our Saturday night, and he was asking me what beers I would want before we went out. I said I don't mind, and he said okay. Then he said, "I've got to go now. I'll speak to you later, mate." So he went on his way. Little did I know that would be the last time I'd speak to him. You see, on his way to work, he lost control of his car on a slippery road and hit a tree, killing him instantly. I had just left for work when his mom knocked on my mom's door, asking to speak to me. My mom told her I'd just left for work. When my mom asked what was wrong, his mom burst into tears and explained that my best friend had died in a car accident. So I got to work, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then my phone rang. It was a close friend of ours. He was in tears, trying to explain what had happened to my best mate. Not believing him, I phoned my mom to see what was going on, and she explained that his mom had tried to catch me before I left for work to tell me the bad news. After finding out the bad news, I was in total shock. I couldn't believe it. I only spoke to him a few hours earlier. I left work in a daze. It felt like everything around me stood still. The whole day was something like out of the movies. The grief had hit me hard, and I didn't know what to do as the day dragged on and the night drew in. He was all that I could think of. Fighting back the tears, I tried to get some sleep. 3 hours later, I was still awake, so I turned on my side facing the wall, and a bright light shone behind me. Turning over to see what the light was, I was frozen to the spot, staring in disbelief as my best friend, who earlier was killed in a car accident, was standing there, smiling at me, before disappearing. I believe it was his way of telling me he was all right at that moment. I felt a little comfort. This all happened in 2007. To this day, it still affects me, and I miss him so much. So keep your loved ones close, 'cause life is short and can be taken within an instant. And so we've reached the end of The Darkest Hour. But I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight, and everyone for sharing. Be sure to join me every Friday night, right here on The Darkest Hour YouTube channel. If you love The Darkest Hour, and you never want it to end, be sure to hit that subscribe button and tell all your friends. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com. And check out our subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.